Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Customer Experience Behind the Scenes. And this is the webcast where we move past those buzzwords and explore what truly drives meaningful customer experiences. I'm Carl Charisse, your host, and I'm delighted that you're here today with us for what promises to be another insightful conversation in Season 3, Episode 10. Wow, we've come a long way. If you joined us before, it's great to have you back with us as part of this growing CX community. And if this is your first time tuning in, a warm welcome to all of you. You're among a diverse mix of professionals who share one thing in common: genuine commitment to learning from one another and putting CX principles into practice in the real world. And just a reminder, if you'd like to catch up on any of the previous episodes, they're all available to replay at any time on questionpro.com. As a quick introduction for those of you who may not know me, I lead Horizon CX, a consulting practice focused on helping organizations operationalize customer experience in ways that actually work and stick. I'm also the creator of the CX Pro certification program, which has now equipped over 185 professionals worldwide with the skills to build stronger customer-centric organizations. And along the way, I've authored 2 companion books. One is titled CX Pro, A Practical Guide for the New Customer Experience Manager, and another one titled CX Pro Beyond the Basics, Advanced Insights for Customer Experience Professionals. Both are designed to guide CX practitioners from learning to mastery, and both are available on Amazon. And more recently, I developed a new training series called Effective Customer Communications, which zeroes in on the one thing that connects every great customer experience, and that is clear, empathetic, and human communications. And even more recently, I am so thrilled as of today to share that I have my newest book called Rock and Roll Underdogs: Hidden Gems Within the Shadows of Stardom. It was just released today. It's a project close to my heart, and it celebrates those musicians who created remarkable music, yet never quite broke through into the mainstream. And in many ways, it mirrors the spirit of CX: passion, perseverance, and the drive to make meaningful impact, even when the recognition doesn't come easily. Now, with that bit of good news shared, let's turn to today's conversation. CX Behind the Scenes is all about authenticity. Real stories, real challenges, real breakthroughs from people in the field. So as you listen, don't just sit back there. Join in. Use the chat to share your reflections and perspectives. And let's make this hour a conversation, not just a broadcast. I want to turn it over briefly here to Sean Albertson from Question Pro to give us an introduction for those who are unfamiliar with Question Pro, as hard to believe as that may be. Sean?
Thanks, Carl, and welcome everyone. I'm so happy that you joined us today or are watching online after the fact. These sessions are an incredible opportunity to learn, grow, understand the changing dynamics in customer experience. So I'm Sean Albertson. I'm a professional speaker. I'm an author. I'm a consultant. I'm a founder of the CX on the Rocks collective. That is also a community of like-minded folks looking to learn and grow. But so happy to be here on CX Behind the Scenes, because my most important role right now is VP of Journey Management at Question Pro. Now, I have always been focused on the customer journey in my career, and more recently, I had an experience that was by far one of the best I've ever had. I mean, I talked to the contact center, I used the mobile app and online tools, and literally went into the local branch or office and was able to click a link, and immediately it put me in queue and in line. It was an incredible experience, just one that was phenomenal. And it was my local DMV. What? Long time, DMV stories. I think they have a new show coming about the horrors of the DMV, but it's one of those areas that often gets overlooked a little bit in CX, the public sector. And great experiences can be and should be anywhere. And the opportunity to really understand that and dig in. I'm so excited about the topic today because of that. Now, at Question Pro, we absolutely agree and believe that the journey is where it's important, and the journey management platform, the customer journey management platform, isn't just about mapping. It's about taking that content, understanding the context of the experience, of the customer's experience, and using that to manage or orchestrate and design that better solution. So incredible opportunities to use real data and insights to make real change. Because a lot of folks I talk to when it comes to customer experience, they have this challenge of creating the return on investment that's needed or expected. And usually it's because they lack the context. They're listening, but they're not learning. And so that opportunity to embrace the journey, this revival, if you will, of the customer journey and journey mapping is really creating the relevance for those CX teams to drive the kind of changes that their executives want to see. Oh, and by the way, if you're thinking of AI at all, look at the journey first. Don't go chase the shiny, AI object. Look at the journey. Learn where AI can be of assistance, because you don't want to be the 95% that aren't delivering on what was expected, as MIT reports. You want to be the 5% or more that says, hey, we know the context, we know the journey, and we know how to implement and make that change. But again, you didn't come to listen to me. You came to listen to Sarah and Carl. But welcome to this great webinar. And I know you're going to learn some amazing things. And again, happy to be able to be a part of this about the public sector and the importance that it is for all of us as well, because we're all part of that public that they serve.
Thanks, Sean. And that's interesting that you mentioned the RMV, because I just had an experience as well. And it wasn't what I expected from my comparison from years ago. So obviously things are changing in the public sector. So we'll get into that. Thanks again. Okay, so before we jump into today's conversation, let's start with our usual quick poll to kind of frame up this discussion. And so, Pauline, yeah, you got it up there. So when it comes to improving residents' experience in government services, what do you think poses the biggest challenge? We're going to see that in the poll. Is it limited funding and resources? Is it outdated systems and technology? Is it siloed departments, resistance to change, or simply a lack of customer-centered mindset? So let's take a moment to share our responses, and we'll take a quick look at the results in just a minute to see how your perspectives match what we're thinking. So I'm going to use my QR code here on my phone to sign in. And there we are. Something's happening behind the scenes. That's why we call it behind the scenes. There we are. What's the biggest challenge to improving the resident experience in government services? Limited funding, outdated systems, technology, siloed departments, poor communication or collaboration? There we go.
All of the above.
Well, with only 3 responses in, I guess we still have to go by that.
I was going to vote for siloed departments if I had to vote.
I think I did that vote. Anyway, so there you have it. Today, I am thrilled to welcome our guest, Sarah Andrews, founder and principal of Cupola CX. I had to relearn how to pronounce that right. Not cupola, it's cupola. Now, here in New England, Boston has a different kind of way of speaking. They might call it cupola, but that's cupola. We've got that established. A boutique consulting firm helping organizations remove friction from their customer experiences. Sarah has spent the last 20 years helping business, healthcare systems, and even municipalities take better care of the people they serve. Her focus has always been on ensuring that the experiences they deliver not only meet expectations, but keep people coming back. She spent 11 years with Press Ganey, working with hospitals across the country to understand their patient experience and develop strategies to improve it. From there, she was recruited by a private equity company to build customer experience teams for the businesses they acquired and launched, including leading CX for a $25 million managed services provider, where she helped merge multiple acquisitions into one seamless experience. And Cupola, Sarah brings together human-centered design and change management principles to create solutions that work for both customers and employees, driving loyalty, trust, and revenue by improving relationships at every touchpoint. Sarah is a proud graduate of Purdue University and lives in South Bend, Indiana, with her husband and 3 teenage sons, who, by the way, are currently embarking on an ambitious 48-state adventure together. Sarah, welcome to Customer Experience Behind the Scenes. Great to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me today, Carl.
So I have to ask, before we even get into our topic of the day, what is this 48-state family adventure? What is it? How's it going?
Yes. So we are on this crusade to try to get our 3 teenagers to all 48 contiguous states before our oldest heads off to college. I'm married to an engineering teacher, and so we definitely have a rubric by which we have to follow in terms of we have to spend the night, we have to all be together, have to have something of local cuisine, have to go to a sporting event, a national or state park in the state. So we really want to make sure that we get the essence of the state. So I am super excited to say that we have visited 46 states, and we have 2 more to go. We have a junior in high school, so I think we'll be able to make it in time.
Have you been to the New England states?
Of course, absolutely. We knocked those out pretty early. It's easy to get a bunch at one time.
Yeah. I mean, sure, you've been to the state of Maine, the wonderful state of Maine.
Yes,
the state
beautiful.
of Maine that has more coastline per mile than California, believe it or not.
We learned it also has more islands than Hawaii.
Yeah, it's incredible.
We went up to Cadillac Mountain and saw the first sun to hit the contiguous U.S.
Did you drive or walk?
We drove.
Well, yeah, I did that too, and I drove. Anyway, Sarah, let's start here with a question right off the bat here, because people may be unfamiliar with the concept. How would you describe human-centered design, and why is it particularly relevant in the context of government or public service delivery?
Sure. So the way I think about human-centered design is really all about a collaborative effort. And so it's not us just sitting in a conference room designing with hypotheses, but really getting out and speaking directly to our users who are actually interacting with our product or service. I think a lot about the quote from Dr. Margaret Mead, who says, what people do, what people say, and what people say they do are all different. And so we need to be able to get out and actually observe people in the moment, using a product, getting stuck, really trying to think about some of their assumptions, what some of the ways that they think about using a service so that we're designing for the right needs. I also think about when people are showing up at City Hall, they're not showing up to kind of fill out paperwork, but they're showing up because they have some sort of life moment that's happened for them. So, for example, they have just moved to the city, and so they need trash and water services set up, or they just got a puppy, and so they need to build a fence. So they need a permit for that fence. And so if we kind of center our design around those life moments instead of around, the bureaucracy that can sometimes show up, we end up with a better interaction, not only just for the resident in that case, but also for the employee. The work from Jennifer Palka, who wrote a book called Recoding America, she talks a lot about how the public service is really built around rules and regulations, and it's compliance focused, and it has to be, right? So we are all treated fairly as residents of where we live. But policy, of course, is written by one group, and then the way that's implemented is a different group. And so human-centered design can kind of be the bridge to bring those two together.
And that makes perfect sense. We recently moved from a city to a town, and we had a couple of occasions to go to the town hall. And it was a really quite the contrast from city to town. And I'm not sure if that was the reason for it, but I mean, here in Salisbury, Massachusetts, where I live, the town hall is an old building, and you can see just from the wood and oak doors inside. And so when you walk into a place like that, you expect your experience is going to be one thing, but all of a sudden you're really pleased when it becomes something a little bit different. And they were very open, very friendly, and very welcoming. And in fact, one of the departments we walked into, they were the ones that did the inspection on the house we moved into. So there you go.
Well, and I think that's kind of the luxury in some of the smaller towns is they're able to then talk to residents directly in workshops or get them in focus groups where they might be their neighbors even. And so kind of getting that firsthand experience around what does it feel like when you're going through this process, help us better understand what, was the delight or what was the friction.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to ask this question here, because we are seeing a shift in how public agencies view that role of experience, So from your perspective, what's really driving that change, and how are the organizations beginning to embrace that more human-centered approach? And I have a parenthetical here because Sean mentioned the RMV. And I just had an experience of registering a car at an RMV. It wasn't in this town. It was a couple of towns away. But it was really quite different. I hadn't done that in many, many years because I hadn't bought a car in many years.
Yeah.
And I had to register a car from the get-go. And so it was either you make an appointment or you just walk in there, and there's two different lines. But the process, there's a mechanics to the process. But I found that the people who are executing, executing on the policies that those institutions have established, really makes the difference. I think RMV is a real special case because you get every walk of life going into the RMV. I'm just standing in a line and I'm listening to the persons in front of me who is trying to get, their car back on the road after having accumulated a bunch of tickets that they didn't pay for. And the agent trying to tell them that they can't do that until the tickets are paid. And the person's asking about, well, how do I pay these tickets? And this person's explaining, well, first you have to get a job and make some money. So when you think about the cases of people walking in there and the issues that it's really a tough environment to. But anyway, I probably kind of deviated from the question here, which was, what's driving the change to want to be better at this?
Sure. And I think it's the same for any industry, truly, Carl. If we think about, how have the expectations of our neighbors, of our residents evolved? They're no longer just comparing us to other agencies as, government interactions, but instead they're comparing us to how they interact with their bank or how they interact with retail or hospitality. And so that has caused us to need to meet the need for not just information, but the process. So, both you and Sean mentioned, you guys were able to go online and actually book an appointment. That harkens back obviously to, healthcare and to getting a haircut. And so how can we as government, if there's many rinse and repeat activities that we know residents do at certain points of their life, how can we serve up some of those in a little bit easier way? If you're re-roofing your house, for example, that is something that should be a pretty cut and dry thing for your contractor to go online to digitize that form for them so that we're looking for specific things to reduce a visit into, your town or your city hall.
Yeah.
The other thing that helped us was President Biden did an executive order while he was in office that was really focused on customer experience. That was the first time at the federal level that customer experience became a priority for folks. And so they were tasked with looking at very common interactions. So for example, registering a baby after you have a baby, getting a social security number for that child, turning 65 and getting on Medicare, looking at those processes from soup to nuts, from start to end, to understand where are the common friction points, where are we continually getting phone calls from people because it's not clear. And so that helped everyone start to kind of move in this direction of, hey, customer experience does matter. These aren't, customers in the traditional sense, but certainly how can we build trust with people that we have to take care of as their resident?
Yeah. My wife works in the public university space, and you could make the same argument there too, because I heard lots of stories. I won't say who she works for because I don't want to implicate anybody, but it just seems to me that there's a lot of process, protocol, and rules and regulations that get in the way of the focus on the customer, which is the student.
Yep.
And it's so I think a lot of what we're talking about here applies to public universities as well.
Yeah, higher education and government typically have hierarchical systems. They have many long-standing processes. They have antiquated technology. And so there is a lot of parallels between those two industries. But that's not to say we can just throw up our hands and say, oh, well, it is what it is. What are the small bite-sized things that we can start to tick off one by one and to kind of move the ball down the field? Because we're not going to be able to do a wholesale change like we would in maybe some of the other industries that we work in. But how can we find like one, low effort, high impact thing that we can maybe just start trialing with a certain set of residents, or in that case, students.
Okay, so Jerry Seifert has a comment here. Lots of folks are going to be sorry they missed this awesome conversation. Sarah, my question is, in your view, why are civic services seemingly late to see the need to improve citizen experiences? And as a follow-up, what can the CX community do to help? After all, civic services are the one place where everyone has business at one time or other. So the aggregate improvement in experiences across the entire citizenry could be dramatic. Absolutely.
Yes, it's so good to know that you're on this call, Jerry. Hi. And I think one of the reasons they're late to the party is because we haven't, as CX professionals, typically focused on them as ways to, lend our services to them. So how can we start sharing some of the ways that we are traditionally using in other industries, some of our tools? So things like building a persona, looking for jobs to be done for the people that we're serving, starting out, as Sean mentioned, building journey maps. Those aren't just buzzwords. Those are real tools that you can scale to public sector that really help us better understand all the pieces that are happening within one particular process. And that's one of my favorite things. Jerry knows this about me, but if I had a bingo card, my center square would be cross-functional collaboration, because the way that you do this work in the public sector is you must get all those different departments in a room together. You must get them to talk about, it's not about building a better website. It's instead making it easier for a resident to pay their water bill. That's the goal. And we use that as the goal. That becomes more motivating to departments to want to work together. And using simple exercises, things like how might we, get the creative juices flowing with these folks. This is not work that they get the luxury to do every day like we do, but they all have really great ideas. And so how can we get them to start thinking in that matter? Doing something like a sailboat exercise, which I love doing with a brand new team that you're bringing together for the first time. What's going to be the wind in our sail and what's going to be the anchor to hold us back? When we start building those types of discussions in the public sector, we start to be able to identify areas that we can start to work on slowly but surely.
You made me just think of another public sector that I have interaction with. We have a cabin up in Maine, and we're powered by Central Maine Power. And we have found that they, as an entity, are the best at communication because there's a lot of weather events in Maine,
Sure.
Snow and wind and all kinds of issues and power outages and stuff like that. And their communication is phenomenal. We've always, been apprised of anything like if there's a storm coming and the likelihood of outages, when there is an outage and how long it's going to be before it gets back. It's all digital communication, but I find it excellent. So.
Well, but think about what that does for you and your wife, Carl, when you're there. That helps you build trust, and that makes you know that they really care about your safety. It's cold here in northern Indiana. I know it's very cold in Maine. And if you don't have electricity for an extended period of time, that's dangerous. We all saw what happened in Texas a few winters ago. And so how, other companies are using communication, proactive communication, show me that you know me. That's one of my favorite phrases when we think about CX. Show me that you care about me as an individual customer, not just as, oh, I'm lumped in with everybody else.
Yeah, and I mean that becomes really critical. I mean, we're only an hour, just a little over an hour away. But if we lose power up there, I mean, there's things, there's a refrigerator with food in it. I mean, do I have to run up there? Do I have to drive that hour? I mean, or
Yeah.
not? How long is it going to be out? So let me ask this, unlike private sector, I mean, you talk about the collaboration in the public sector and the necessity for, I mean, there are a lot of private organizations where that's lacking as well. So, they don't get off on this.
No.
But anyway, unlike private sector, government doesn't compete for customers like what private companies do, like public companies and private companies. How do you motivate public agencies to adopt that customer-centric mindset when traditionally you don't use retention as a metric?
Sure. When I think about public versus private sectors, my mind immediately goes to some of the work from Jerry Talley, who is a Stanford professor, and he talks a lot about like the moral obligation that we have in the public sector to make sure that we're serving people equitably, that we're minimizing the time that it takes them to fill out, a document, and that we are increasing their self-sufficiency so that they become more independent. But really, instead of market share, we're thinking about trust. How are we earning trust? So we as residents and neighbors are not, typical customers, but in some way you are, needing my trust, my voice as a part of a civic process. And so how can I, erode trust? Well, you can erode trust by making a crummy website for me to operate within, for, making me fill out a form 100 different times for the same thing. That's eroding trust. But when we start to look at ways like, hey, Carl, hey, that was pretty easy for you to register that car, right? You have probably told that story to, I would guess, a handful of people. Like, you'll never believe how easy this was. And so that is a way to be putting some coin into that trust bank. And I don't know about other states, but here in my state of Indiana, there is quite a reduction in budgets available both at the state and local level. So this work is no longer just a nice to have, but it is really helping to reduce some of the operational costs. Because if we do have a confusing form, or we do have a dead end website, what do people do? They pick up the phone and they call, or they show up in city hall or town hall. And so that is costing those departments a lot of extra money. And so by doing some of this work, it helps to reduce that burden, and it also is building that trust.
Yeah. Okay, so we have looks like some audience questions here. Let's see to get through here.
Sure.
Eric is asking, please, can you explain further what human-centered design is about and the impact it would have on the public sector? We kind of did touch upon that, but maybe you can elaborate on that a little bit more for Eric.
Yeah, sure. So human-centered design, as I said, it's really not about me designing in a vacuum. It's getting out in public. So an example, Eric, to think about, if I am designing a new service for a city, the best way for me to understand how that service is going to impact residents is to be boots on the street. And so one city that I worked with, we started tabling at many different community events. And so we were trying to understand what are some proactive services that we can start offering to residents. And so I got out a giant sandwich board, and we put all these different services on the board, and we gave people little kind of persona narratives. So, one was Sebastian, who was moving to town. One was, a senior citizen living alone, and one was a single mom who was having a hard time paying her bills. And what we wanted to see is, how do people group these different services to meet the needs of these neighbors? And so us looking at that data helped us better see, okay, people equate this need with this type of service. And so instead of us just sitting there and, brainstorming, we were out in the community and talking to people directly. We then built on that based on that early data that we collected, and then we did smaller focus groups. So actually reaching out to those different persona types to understand, hey, when you run into this problem, not being able to pay your water bill, what are some of the things that you're looking for the city to help you with? And that helped us see that it's not just a city problem, of course, but how can we then start reaching out and working with other agencies in our community? So people like United Way, people like Real Services, the library, making sure that we're building together, not just for the government and for the resident or the neighbor, but also other agencies in the area.
Now, you mentioned library. There's another public space that, it's almost always a good experience.
Yes,
I don't know if you've ever run into a bad library experience. I have never.
No, I live 2 blocks from my local library.
On
Yes, and I always go in and I tell the librarians they are more than a librarian. They are also a social worker. They're helping people navigate, government every single day.
Oh, here's one here from Kimberly Peters. Do you sense that the public sector is designing based on citizens' emotions?
Maybe recently they should start designing around resident emotions. I don't think that is work that has maybe trickled down to the public sector quite yet. I know many, private sector companies are using some of that emotion work to design their services, but I haven't seen that started to kind of make their way into the public sector yet.
It's funny when I think of citizens, I just put emotions in this thing because I've been in 2 businesses where I've expressed my dismay at something that they don't have or don't offer. And the response will come back, we hear that from a lot of folks. And I'm thinking to myself, my wife, I said, if you're hearing this from a lot of folks, consider doing something about that.
Exactly right.
Let's see here. We've got some others. Sarah was asking here, how do you engage internal prioritization of CX improvements in a public service or monopoly when the business case for great CX is not always clear?
Yeah, I think we touched on that a little bit already, but certainly to pull on that thread a little further, really it is around understanding your system today. So while we may not be looking for market share, you are certainly absorbing some operational costs when experience is not going quite right for a resident or for a citizen. And so how are we looking at how to find information and serve that up a little bit easier for residents? How are we making sure that the forms that are digitized are equitable for everyone, that they are optimized for both, desktop and for mobile? Because any inefficiencies in your process today, you're absorbing that in your system. That's another call into your call center. That's people not being compliant with a particular, form. And that's causing more issues. And so when we are able to design thoughtfully and really think about the users, and when I say users, I'm not just talking about residents, but I'm also talking about your employees. So the government employees. So how are they, to your point, Carl, like how many times have they had to apologize or re-explain something because it's not clear? And so those are some of the business case. If we can show the operational efficiency that's gained through changing something or redesigning a system. Once again, we can't do wholesale changes in government, but there are certain small things that we can start to do that can help alleviate some of the operational burden that's on your team today.
That makes me think of something else here. Government needs to serve everyone, right?
Yep.
Okay. How do you ensure that the human-centered design approach doesn't just optimize experiences for those digitally connected? I am, but I know a lot of folks aren't, but also includes those who are kind of left behind that digital access.
Right. So I think that goes back to looking at some of the data that you have today within your, within your city or within your township, within your state, and understanding what are the ways in which people are accessing this information today. Certainly prioritizing for that largest group. So we do have, in the city in which I live, we have a good number of contractors that prefer to come in person to apply for a permit. And so we needed to, really try to operationalize and digitize some of those forms. But guess what? That wasn't the right thing to do because people preferred to come in person. They wanted to be able to walk through their projects one-on-one with the building department. And that wasn't able to happen if we were just digitizing the form. And so really looking at those particular jobs to be done of each of those resident types and knowing that, a digital native is going to want it a certain way. And, my 70-year-old father is going to want it a different way. And so how can we look at volume to help us make the right decision and what tweaks need to be made across that particular process?
And that works the other way too, because again, I'm in a town. There was a town meeting last night, which we could not attend physically, but then we rely on digitally, right? Because the closed circuit TV of the town can broadcast that. So even though you can't be a vocal participant in there, you could at least listen. So, it works that way as well.
Yeah, you're still looped in.
Yeah. Let's see here. We have a question here I see from Michael asking, you spoke about removing friction in government processes, but sometimes friction exists because of policy or regulation. How do you balance compliance requirements with the need to make, I didn't see, yeah. How do you balance compliance requirements and the need to make things easier for residents?
Right. Yeah, Michael, for sure. Sometimes friction is intentional, which I hate saying it that way. But when we're talking about government, sometimes the friction is actually to make sure that people are being compliant with the process. And so how can we look and better understand the reason behind the policy? And so if there is a way that we need to better communicate to the public around the policy, because sometimes if we don't give enough information, people can make their own narrative about that policy. And so ensuring that we're arming the frontline team members within the government agency around why this policy is written in this way and how it has to be implemented, so that when they are coming up against an objection from the person they're working with on that particular process, they're able to explain it. Hey, Carl, we just want to make sure that we're looking at this application the same way that we would anyone's application. And so that's why we're asking for you to fill out these 4 things. And so really making sure that you're talking through the team so that they're not saying, oh, I know this is such a headache, isn't it? We want to make sure that we're giving good guidance and guardrails around why we have particular friction. And making sure if there is an easier way to protect, maybe in this case, like capture a digital signature versus requiring someone to mail in a form. Are there other opportunities that if people do want to come in person, maybe we have a scanner available so they can scan their document and that can help speed up the process. So there are kind of ebbs and flows that you can look at, still making sure that we're within the letter of the law, but ensuring that everyone is on the same page about why we have those rules.
You and I spoke about this before. Many local governments, they want to start, but they feel like they're overwhelmed. Okay. Yeah. What's your advice for taking the first step? How can they build a small pilot or whatever to build confidence to spark a broader cultural shift or change?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I would mention just for folks to put tools in their toolbox. First and foremost, if people are not familiar, the state of New York, they have a specific Office of Customer Experience. And so if you are not sure where to begin, that is a fantastic place to start. They have been extraordinarily transparent with all of their roadmaps, their toolkits, their training guides, really from beginning the process to implementing your first human-centered design project. They have everything out there for you. So I think that's a really great kind of, hey, what does good look like? Not that you have to copy everything that they're doing, but it'll kind of give you a good idea of the pacing in which you need to get started. The other thing, I know that there is a course through the Stanford Design School on how to use human-centered design in building government services. So that's something else that you could put on your list. There's a couple books that I always keep handy on my desk. So we have Smart Communities and then Recoding America. These are fantastic books that really talk about human-centered design in government. And then the last thing is looking at some of the old Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge contests. So the Bloomberg Mayor's Challenge, it's open to every city in the world. And it is a way to really promote innovation within city designed services. So there are ways that you can look to see what are other cities doing in the past? What are people trying to tackle right now? So all that being said, those are the tools I'd kind of put in my toolbox. And then when you're looking within your own city, within your own town, where do you start? It really starts with looking for the highest volume, highest frustration. So I would start with that kind of what are people coming to us with the most frequently and where do we get the most complaints? So, I'm making this up, but maybe for your town, maybe it is starting a new water service. Maybe that is your highest call volume. And that's also where people say, hey, man, like I never knew when you were coming. There was miscommunication. There wasn't the right expectation around, how much it was going to be to start a new service. So kind of looking at that high volume, high frustration and getting that cross-functional team together in a room to say, hey, this is what we're focusing on, starting a water service. What is each department's role in that process? And getting people to kind of map that out together. And what is the one tiny thing that we could do today that will help alleviate that process? Whether that process is an internal process that will help make it easier for the team, or whether it's an external process that will make it easier for the resident, and kind of starting there. And it's very slow because we're in government. So you have to be very patient, but kind of knowing that the first hurdle is just getting all of those folks in the room together to talk about it.
Yeah, in fact, that was one of the questions I had here about how it requires cross-functional cooperation between departments. And those departments, sometimes they rarely ever talk to one another.
It's kind of shocking, really, when you think about, how complex and how many team members are within, state or local government, and just getting them to come together. That was something that was quite surprising to me when I was working with one city. And you're always going to have a couple folks in that room that are going to be sitting there, arms crossed, not really excited to be there. But one of the things that was exciting to me with this city I worked with for 18 months, that same person that sat there with their arms crossed in the first meeting, towards the end, he was using, human-centered design lingo. But what does that mean for our resident? And I was so delighted to hear that, after all this work together, people really do want to take good care of the people that come in and trust us with, starting new water, building a, business together, getting that permit, economic redevelopment. People want to serve those folks. We go into this work because it's a passion that we have. It's just like teaching or nursing. You have that real passion. And so if you can ignite that for folks and bring them back together, I think that's where kind of the magic happens.
It made me think of, again, the town hall here in Salisbury, Massachusetts, and even the city we came from too. A lot of times they're in very old buildings. They've been there for years. And when you walk in there, it looks like a hallway with doors. And so people are not like open and exposed to one another,
Right.
So that's got to be a factor in collaboration and communication when you're behind. And most of them are behind the closed doors too. You have to knock on the door to go in there. And different, going back to the RMV experience, because I noticed when I went there, it was a very open environment and everybody could hear what the other and they would talk and they would let me ask my colleague about that. And they would do that. So, the physical environment has a decided effect on how that experience is going to be in a public arena like that, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And by the way, the Office of Customer Experience at New York State, that strategy, I had to go look that up, but I downloaded the document because I was very curious about that. So folks listening to that, just go to ny.gov and you'll find it there.
Yep. What's really cool about the state of New York's Office of Customer Experience as well is they are consistently putting out updates. So every single quarter, they will report on the things that they've been working on. And so they'll tell you kind of the good, bad, and indifferent of what happened and what they kind of ran into, which is really nice that you can see like, hey, they're struggling with the same things in the state of New York as we are in the state of Missouri.
Yep. Let's see. We do have another question here. I want to make sure we get to this. Priya Desai, I guess how do you pronounce it? You mentioned small wins earlier. What's an example of a small win that made a surprisingly big difference in building trust or momentum inside an organization?
Sure. So one that comes to mind, I live in Northern Indiana and we are in the snow belt, being right next to Lake Michigan. And so one of the things that a city did is actually started publishing an interactive map of where the snowplow was going to be. So that didn't take a huge effort. I mean, the snowplows are already out, but now we're just notifying residents of where they're going to be throughout the day. And so that actually helped reduce the call volume into this city's customer service team because people were calling and saying, hey, I haven't been plowed yet. Like I can't get out of my driveway. But now by having that information, you can kind of see, oh, okay, they're going to be swinging by my neighborhood at 10 a.m. And so it's kind of empowering people with that information. That's a really small example. It didn't take a big lift from the team to be able to do that, but it empowers folks with the information they need.
I suspect they got that idea from Amazon, because Amazon has that little thing on, you look on your phone to where is my package right now? So I can see it's 5 stops away, so I can be waiting at the door when it arrives.
Exactly. Well, and I think in the state of Minnesota, they do a pretty creative job of making sure people understand where the snowplows are. And then they also take it a step further and they have a contest where people can name the snowplows, which is a fun way we talked about earlier, kind of building trust with your constituents to the government, but also showing like, we like to have a fun time too. Let's invite residents to name the newest snowplow.
Wow. We got one more here, I see, from David Morales. For teams just starting to explore human-centered design, let me see here, what kind of skills or mindset should they focus on developing first, especially if they don't have a formal design background?
Yeah, the good news is you don't have to be a designer to do this work. The best thing that you can do is have just a curious mind. And I think one of the things that we actually hurt ourselves by doing is we make a lot of assumptions about how users are going to be interacting with our service. And so the first thing that we need to do is just start asking why. Why are residents interacting in this way? What are some of the things that they're trying to accomplish? How can we start listening to residents? So once again, getting out of the conference room and out on the street to talk to residents, making sure that we're seeking their counsel as we're starting to build something new. We're hearing directly from them around some of the frustration or some of the like, hey, I assumed it would do this and it did this instead. That is such gold for us to be able to know when we're designing something. And then we've mentioned it several times today, Carl, but really just collaboration. How can we make sure that we are reaching across the aisle, reaching across the hallway to other departments who oftentimes do not participate in this type of work to begin with? And so you sometimes have to be that brave soul to convene that group for the first time. So getting together those departments that say, hey, I don't even talk to a resident. I'm, back of the house. It's like, well, but your process impacts what the resident sees. And so it's important to have you around the table. And then obviously making sure that people know that we are going to be stubbing our toe on some broken sidewalk. Sorry for the pun, but we are going to have to be iterating. We have very limited budgets. We aren't able to change so many things at one time because we work within this highly regulated space. And so we're going to have to try some very lo-fi techniques before we get to the final product. And so all of that together is you really are building this kind of muscle over time. It's not going to be overnight. It's going to take, a year, 2 years, which seems excruciating. But know at the end of the day that you're really putting that resident, your neighbor, in the center of all the work that you're doing.
I think, as a resident of a town, we're in kind of the age of division here. So, and people have expectations or perceptions of, I'm dealing with local government. I know I'm not going to have a great time at this, and I'm already set for an argument of some sort here. But I think it's really incumbent upon people when they're approaching, a public agency to have some amount of empathy for the people that work there. Because like I said on the RMV, there's some really difficult situations that you find yourself in, and you're presented with these day after day. That's got to be tough for people who work in that environment.
Absolutely. I think Brene Brown said it, if you don't like that person, you need to move closer. You need to move in and better understand their situation, because many times when we are, dealing with highly emotional situations, if I have to turn your water off, do you think I, as a city employee, take joy in that? I do not. I, think about that family. And so how can we make sure that we are keeping empathy in the center of that work and making sure we're supporting our team members, because they are probably kind of moving into burnout because they have to keep apologizing for a broken system over and over again.
Well, this has been, we could probably talk for another hour here, but we're coming down to 50 minutes here. And I want to go through what I call a lightning round questions here.
Okay.
So these are intentionally short answers, but you can expound where you feel necessary. So
okay.
Number one is, what's one word you'd use to describe a great residence experience? One word.
Easy.
Easy. Okay. If you could fix one common frustration residents face when dealing with local government, what would it be?
Lack of information.
Yeah,
I don't know where to go.
Yeah. What's a book, a podcast, or a resource that's recently inspired your thinking about design or CX in general?
Yeah, I think I mentioned my two favorite books, Smart Communities and Recoding America. Those are good ones. And then, of course, I'm a huge Brene Brown fan. And so I'm halfway through Strong Ground. And I think that has some really great leadership tips in it as we talk about trying to convene folks that don't always work together. There's got some good tips in that on how to do that.
What do you think is harder to change, processes or mindsets? And why?
Oh. Well, mindsets, because we're dealing with emotions, going back to Kimberly's question. A process is easy. It doesn't talk back. It doesn't have issue with change management, but mindsets do.
Yep. And people have mindsets about before they even deal with a public agency. I've got a mindset about it. I'm not going to like this.
You did with the BMV, right? You're like, oh, this is going to be horrible. And then it delighted you.
Yep. And lastly, if you weren't leading Cupola CX, what other career or passion might you be pursuing?
Oh, that is so easy. I would be chaining myself to historic buildings that they're trying to tear down. I am a historic preservationist at heart. And so if I didn't have to work for money, I would be doing that.
Oh, I'll bet you have some thoughts about what's happening with that house with the east wing there.
We almost made it all the way through this recording, Carl, without talking about that.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. I will go elsewhere. Lastly, I'm going to ask this question. If you could imagine the resident experience of the future, say 10 years from now, what would delight in the public sector look like?
If I had to go in a time machine, I would want it to be really intuitive. I would want it, we think about our cities, they know so much about us already today. And it's kind of disappointing that they don't use some of that information they know about us to serve us the information in the time that we need it. And so I would want a really intuitive city to show me that you understand me, show me that you understand. Before we started recording, Carl and I were talking about the number of leaves that we have in our yard. So show me that, I have, 2 yardfuls of leaves, and come and pick up my leaves more regularly than a neighborhood that has no trees in their neighborhood. So things like that meet my need, instead of having me to call the city and say, I need another leaf pickup because I have 10 yards of leaves.
I have a vision for a really cool technology. It would be this giant leaf vacuum, and it would be a service that would be offered by the town, right? To come by, you rake up your leaves into a pile, and it comes by and it just vacuums them into this and composts them somewhere.
That's what we do. That's what we do here in South Bend.
Do you really?
Yeah. And then you can get free compost from the city in the springtime.
We need to know that here in Salisbury, Massachusetts. I can tell you that. Anyway, Sarah, this has been a wonderful conversation. We do have a survey that Paulina tends to run here near the end of it. And if there's I think she puts a QR code up here. We'll see it in a second. But I want to thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful. Great conversation. There it is right there. Rate this episode. And before we wrap up, I want you to be sure to mark your calendars, because we have another episode here. It would be the episode 11 coming up on November 25th at this same time, where I'll be joined by Elaine Ties, one of Europe's leading thinkers on customer and employee transformation. Elaine will help us explore what it really takes to make customer transformation stick, how to build movement inside your organization that self-propels rather than fades once the excitement dies down. And we'll also touch on how customer experience and transformation can become the next commercial differentiator in a world awash with AI-driven sameness. those are his words, and how to use customer feedback like NPS, not just to measure satisfaction, but to drive real business decisions and growth. And that prompts us to be a rich and practical discussion about moving from talk to traction in the CX space. I hope you'll join us then. And as always, thanks for being part of customer experience behind the scenes. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Thanks
Sarah.
for having me. Bye, everyone.